Welcome to 2021. Yes, we made it to the other side. And for those of you who know we just got a new RV. His name is Richie. And one of the things I've learned from having Richie is that even though you have rear view mirrors and you have a backup camera, you need someone to get out to kind of help you really navigate going backwards because you have a lot more blind spots. And that's what this episode is about, blind spots. Sometimes somebody has to get out and spot you. You can't just rely on the rearview mirrors. You got to have some additional help. Stay tuned and let's find out what that's like.
Coming up next on this episode of the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee, episode 78.
Welcome to the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil
and Renee, where amazing things happen. Our goal is to help build, repair, and restore healthy relationships.
Our primary focus is on the marriage relationship. However, the topics are applicable to the relationships that we value most. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.
Well, we are actually back at our home. We call it the Big House.
The Big House.
The Big House. So we're actually at the Big House this time. That's why it sounds amazing. I'm sorry. That sounds because
he's like a audio snob, y'all. So when we're in Richie, he says it doesn't sound as good.
I try my best. I so do when it comes to the sound and the quality, just to try to make it sound as best we can. But sometimes we're in environments that you
can't control.
No, you can't control it, but it
go with the flow.
Yeah, you do. But we're back in the Big House, and hopefully it sounds good. We hope everybody is doing well in the beginning of 2021. We're actually in the second month of 2021 in February. And this episode that we're actually going to be talking about, it kind of is an element of the hot topic that we always kind of talk about. We're actually going to be talking about, do you
see what I see? And the better question is, do you want to see what I see?
You know, it's one of those things of sometimes you have to open yourself up to some people in your life that can actually help you
see things that you can't see.
And we all have them. And we're going to talk a little bit about something that we learned in church years and years ago. It's called Johari's Window, but that's something that's just an element.
Pastor Reginald Lane taught us that.
Yep, we love him. But that's something that we learned a long time ago, and we have literally applied it in our life, even though it's a psychology therapy type thing. But it's something that can be very, very beneficial in your relationships and even in your own personal life. You know, the more productive that you can actually be with being proactive in your own growth, that's where I think you can really have some good strides, not only in your own self individually, but also in your relationship.
You know, I think I think back to probably the best example of having blind spots and being open to people exposing you to your blind spots is when Aaron was little, and we would go to Alabama to visit her godparents. You know, we were around her every day. So, you know, you just become unaware of things that are going on in your life because sometimes you're just too close to it. You're in it. You're living it. And they would always bring things to our attention and share things with us about parenting and just about life that we didn't know. And I'm so grateful for those life lessons, for those things that they pointed out. Well, had you thought about this? And maybe you need to consider this. And it really helped us as parents. You know, for us, it was a time for Aaron to go and spend time with them, but it was also a time for us to get some insight and some just foresight that we wouldn't have had. Because I think a part of the beauty of having relationships with people is that everyone is in a different stage. Aaron was little, their children were older. And so for those of you who have people in your life who have been where you're going or who've experienced things, we have to be open to letting them share with us about areas that we just can't see.
You know, you asked me a question about I asked you a question about some observations about me.
Yes.
And it was weird because it kind of was a little bit different because I think back when I asked you that, if you could have seen the look on your face, it was kind of like, you're actually asking me what I think about something about me.
Right. You ask me, what did I see? You're like, well, you know what? You're the closest person to me. You know, how do you see me? How do you view me? And I think that's a very healthy part of, even with the book, Rich Relationships, Our Marital Code Oneness. It's going to ask you some questions that's going to make you look at and get to know you. And I thought that was beautiful that you asked that. And when someone gives you that type of, power in their life, one of the things we want it to be sifted through and heavily laden with is empathy and grace.
You know, sometimes you need to open yourself up to hear some things that you may not want to hear.
And you may not even be aware of it.
Well, and that's what really was the driving force behind that, because I had been meditating on something, talking about it and praying about it. And I felt like I didn't get answers, you know, and sometimes I was like, okay, what else can I do if you want to grow or you want to get some, as they say, revelation or some insight into your own personal life and yourself? Obviously, the Holy Spirit and God is going to tell you those things, but God put people on this earth that can help you if you allow them to. But also you have to be open to hear some not so good stuff sometimes, you know, and when those bad things, it's not a bad thing, but when those observations, when those observations come to you, that someone that you have asked to speak to you about a particular area in your life, you have to be totally open to hear it, but also to take action on it.
You know, and it was funny because the way that I thought about it like when you're driving a car, you can use the rear view mirrors and you can use use your mirrors when you're driving a van. But when you get ready to drive like an RV, which is something really big. So in those daily areas of your life, what should I eat for breakfast? What should I wear? You don't need help with those kind of decisions when you're making bigger decisions. But when you start making the really big decisions, like something that's going to be beyond your own ability and your capacity, you have to be open to having people say, tell me more. Mm-hmm. And I think a part of that is, I think about and many times in my life when you're trying to grow, you go to people, it's like, hey, well, what do you think? What do you think about my temper? I remember when Carmen told me one time, she was like, when you talk to people, she was home for college. She said, when you talk to people, you talk to them, you make them feel like they're dumb. And I was like, oh, do I? And so I took that in and I'm like, okay. But I think a part of it is like we talked about when you give people permission. Normally in our culture, people don't have to have permission to tell you what they think and what they see. But I think that it's better received because, my motto is information unrequested is not received. And so I think it's important that we understand there's going to be things about you that you're never going to be able. You talked about Johari's box. It's like it's your blind spot. It's just like when you're driving in a car, there's tests to help you to understand what your blind spots are visually. But what about relationally? What are the tests that you can use to know if, or to even be conscious of, do I have blind spots? If you're a human being, the answer is yes.
Well, why don't you talk a little bit about blind spots then? Because that was kind of the catalyst for maybe the conversation that we're having right now. And I came to you because I had a blind spot. Mm-hmm. I had something that I couldn't see about myself, and I wanted some outside forces or outside persons to come and help me see those things.
Well, if you think about it, it's kind of, I wouldn't want to say self-explanatory, but there are things that we do in relationships that hinder our relationships. Sometimes it's being, we can avoid, we could use laughter. There's lots of ways that we protect ourselves from things that are uncomfortable. And so those relational blind spots are the things that are hindering us from exploring new relationships and meeting new people, because unfortunately our blind spots become our routine. So if our normal routine is to say, yeah, I'm good, I'm fine. Or when someone tells us something that we might not want to hear or something that makes us feel a little uncomfortable, we become defensive. We can become sarcastic. We can isolate ourselves. So there's lots of ways that we begin to navigate what makes us feel uncomfortable. And it hinders us from growing. Sometimes people find themselves in the same unhealthy kind of relationships. The cycle keeps repeating. And a lot of times it's being repeated because we're practicing the same tool.
Right. And we talking about Johari's window, and that's a psychological term that if you've taken psychology or read some self-help books and those types of things, it was two psychologists. I think it was, Luft and Ingram. I can check it, but it was from 1916 that they came up with this philosophy and this therapy type of method that you can actually use. And you talked about the blind spot, and I liked it. And we actually heard it, like we mentioned in the intro, through a pastor. That we had years and years ago back at a church in Detroit. And he mentioned it. And that was the first time I had heard it.
His name was Reginald Lame, and the church was Dunamis Outreach Ministries.
We heard that term, and I was like, wow, that was interesting, because I've always been interested in things that can help you grow individually, but also through the aids of other people.
And it's also not only, I think the real growth is not autonomy. Mm-hmm. Real growth is not isolation. Real growth is not just you by yourself. Real growth is in relationships, because people are going to see things and share things that you are just not privy to, because we all have had different experiences and we're in different places in our life.
And so you mentioned the blind spot, and I love the definition. It's information about you that you don't know, but others do know.
Yes.
So that's something that's one of those areas, if you think about it in your own life, in your own natural, it's hard to realize that you don't see everything about you. You think you do.
No.
But you don't.
Yeah, it's impossible. It's impossible to see everything about you, because unless you have eyes in the back of your head, there's things going on behind you that you just are not privy to. And I think the thing that I loved about when he talked about it, when Pastor Lane was teaching about it, he talked about the parts of you that are hidden because you're keeping a secret, and the part of you that are hidden because, again, we don't have eyes in the back of our head. And one of the verses, I think the scripture, there's, the verse that really helped me, and just the concept was, the wisdom of it is in Proverbs. And it basically talks about a soft anger turns away wrath, but the harsh words stir up anger. And the other verse that I really thought that was really beneficial to this is that it's Proverbs 21:11. It says, when a scoffer is punished, the simple becomes wise. When the wise is punished, the instruction is gained and it becomes knowledge. So I always think about it is that a wise person can learn from other people's mistakes. If you have to be the kind of person, you have to experience everything, the way you respond to correction, the way you respond to, like when you were talking to me about, Renee, well, how do you see me? One, I have to think about how am I going to say this in a way that's going to be beneficial, because yes, you did ask me, but I still have to be careful of how I answer, because I want to make sure that my answer is going to be beneficial to you, and that I'm not just going into a different area. Only in the area that you requested that information should be the only area that I go into. I shouldn't go into 25 areas, just the one area, because I think that sometimes, especially as women, because everything goes together for us. Like, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Men are like waffles, women are like spaghetti. We run everything all together. So I think that sometimes as women, we have to be careful that when people entrust us into these areas of their life, these private areas of their heart, that we're gentle, that we're kind, and that we're patient about the way we deal with it.
And that can be tough sometimes, because you have to be thick-skinned sometimes to hear things about yourself that you may not want to hear. But then take it a step further to be able to do something about it.
Yeah. So when we talked and you asked me that question and I answered, what did you feel you should do with what I said? I mean, how did it make you feel? And
well, it wasn't so much a feeling that I was trying to feel. I wasn't looking at it from a feeling standpoint. I was looking at it for observation to see what is it that I heard, and then process it. I'm a processor. I have to take what you say and then muddle over it and meditate on it, and then see how can I take what I heard and then put it into action to do something with it. Because sometimes you may have to get professional help,
Yeah.
and so don't be shy to think I have to go outside of myself or my church, or to talk to a professional therapist or psychologist or doctor or whoever you need to talk to go deeper. But that was something that I had to really process and say, okay, this is what I know. And based on what you had told me, I said, okay, based on what you said, I processed it and said, okay, this is the plan of action I think I need to take. So it wasn't so much of, for me, it wasn't so much of an emotional to feel based on what you said. It was more taking and doing something with it.
But do you think that that's something you would have done earlier in our relationship?
Oh, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. That was something that you had to grow in. And I think our relationship had to get to a point to where I trusted what you saw and what you were telling me, but also my maturity level had to get to a point and internal confidence to be able to ask you to tell me something about me that would have been maybe challenging for me to hear. So I think it is something that if you have that ability to do it from the very beginning, I think that's great. Some people's relationships are at that level early, but some take time to develop. I think ours has grown over time. We've been together 32 plus years. So therefore we have gone through different plateaus. You always say, you hear it, levels go to different levels. I just think you're just growing, and obviously you're not where you were. So that means you raised up a little higher than where you were. So I guess you could say it's levels, but it was something that I had to take in and look at it to process it, to say, okay, this is where we are. This is where I'm at. Now I feel comfortable enough. It wasn't a conscious decision that I thought, hey, I think I can ask Renee about this now. It wasn't something that I was being conscious of. It was just a natural reaction to be able to come to you and ask you, what did you think?
Yeah, because I think that, like I said, historically, I think that in our culture, because I grew up around a lot of women. And so therefore, with women, we normally talk about everything with anybody at any time. While that might be the culture you grew up in, you have to also be mindful of the people that you're around. And so we're talking about, do you see what I see? Because so many times there are things that are going on in our lives, in our relationships, how we manage money, how we manage conflict, how we manage so many things that is affected by the way we see things. And so it's important that we leverage the benefit of all the people around us, because everybody around you is not in your same stage of life. Maybe they have kids that are older. Maybe they have kids that are younger. Maybe they don't have kids. And so in order to really grow, and I think that what has helped me the most is to be open to seeing things through other people's eyes. And I think that when you can do that, I think that you get to leverage their experience without going through it. And so today we're talking about, do you see what I see? And a better question is, do you want to see what I see?
And that's something that can be challenging. So we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the things we're talking about do you see what I see on this episode. But always in the middle, we always like to say thank you. So we appreciate all the messages and the things. We had the book launch this past week.
It was wonderful. Jervis did an amazing job, and so did Christina Holloway, and so did Ron T. May, author, and evangelist Brenda Henderson, and all of you who were there, who helped us to help let everyone know that people want good books that they can go and get and be
so
a part of.
So why don't you tell them about the book? Because if you hadn't seen it and saw all of the social media stuff, but it's the Marital Code to Oneness workbook.
Yes, and if you live in San Antonio, Texas, we want to just give a special shout out to Abba Father Christian Bookstore. They're carrying our book, and we're so grateful for the gift of relationships, because we want to make sure that this book not only blesses marriages, but that we can see it impact our communities, where it's going to give us the tools, the community, and the support that we need. The thing that I really love, and I'm grateful to God for the inspiration to do this, to be able to have the internal fortitude to keep pushing and keep doing what God called you to do, even when you don't see results. It's just important to be obedient. But I was writing about what makes this book different. And I believe that what makes this big book different is that most books are designed for you to get to know the author and the characters in the book. Well, Rich Relationships Refuge, the Oneness Code workbook, is designed for the reader to get to know the reader.
Kind of like what we're talking about.
get to know yourself. Ask yourself those uncomfortable, difficult questions. And it's designed for you to create something. Because when you're done reading this book, you're going to have your own writings in here. So you're not just consuming information or consuming content. You are now becoming a creator of content, because no one can tell your story. No one can live your life. No one can be who you are except you.
So pick that book up. You can get it from all the platforms. You can go to the website and check it out, and even go on that big store and get it. You should know.
Or you can go to some little local stores and get it as well.
Absolutely. So we appreciate everyone again.
Gil and Renee Beers' over 30-year relationship is the genesis for the Rich Relationship Podcast, which is designed to empower individuals with the tools, principles, and the community needed to unpack ourselves, our past, and our preconceived notions associated with relationships.
Let's get empty and grow together so that our lives will be filled with love and healthy, rich relationships. Now let's go into our show.
So we're back. We're talking about, do you see what I see?
Or do you want to see what I see?
On this episode of the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee, episode 78. And so that's what we're talking about. We mentioned earlier the Johari's window about the psychologist Loving Ingram that actually created this process that you can do as an individual to kind of get an idea of where you are and things in your life when it comes to opening yourself up to see things. And we talked about the blind area. We just going to mention the other areas and talk a little bit about them. The open area. The open areas, this is stuff that you know and others know. Right. That's something that is not necessarily very challenging. It's something that it's the public you. It's right. The image that everybody sees and everybody knows. It doesn't mean it's the most accurate. It just means it's the public.
So that's why social media can be very deceptive. You're only getting a snapshot of people. You're a part of it. In order to really get to know yourself and other people, it takes this thing called time. Mm-hmm. And it takes seeing them in different seasons and different settings and different scenarios. You don't know someone when you've only seen them in one setting.
Right.
So it takes time.
So seeing somebody in that aspect is not really the most accurate depiction of that person. It is just something that they want you to see.
Right.
And then the other areas, and we just want to make sure we give you those areas, but we're also going to talk a little bit more about them, is the hidden area.
And I think that's the one that's hurting us the most and it's not just that what you don't see, it's because one of the things I talk about a lot is that you don't keep secrets or secrets keep you.
Right. And you can elaborate on that, because the hidden areas, this is things that you know, but nobody else knows.
Yeah. And sometimes the things that you know that no one else knows, even though you don't think they know it, they're still a victim of what secrets you're holding. Mm-hmm. Because the secrets that we hold, they don't just affect us. They affect everyone, because they keep you from being hot, honest, open, and transparent. You can't be transparent when you're keeping secrets. And although there may be areas of your life that are open, I think that the people who enjoy life and relationships the most are the ones who are open to being open. Mm-hmm. And being transparent. And no, you can't be transparent with everyone. That was a life lesson for me that I had to learn. But you do need to have someone that you need to be transparent with, you and God. And then you need a human being that you can be totally transparent with, because that's how you're going to grow.
Because you think about your spouse or someone significant in your life that is there and that is close to you. There are going to be times where you want to share things, just like we talked about earlier in this episode that I came to Renee and asked her something about it. She showed me something or told me something, but I had to really open myself up and say, okay, this is what I seen. In other words, this is what I knew about myself. This is a hidden area that I was keeping to me. I was keeping to myself. And sometimes you can go to that person for confirmation. Because if you have that opportunity and have someone in your life that you feel that safe and that comfortable with, that you can go to and inquire about something that you've been just holding on to personally, that is a good time to try it, to be a little less hidden and more open.
Because I think a part of it, one of the things, the first question in the book is really, because the beginning of the book is really about you and you and God. And the question is, what are your core values? Mm-hmm. And that's one of those questions. And when you look at the question, like, well, what do you mean? And what does that have to? don't try to figure out where we're going with the questions. It's just important to answer the questions. Because I think that if you live in the moment of what the question is asking you and you take the time to really write the answer, it's going to help you see some things about yourself that you may not be aware of. And so in order to grow, in order to be seen and to see people, you have to be honest with yourself. And I think that these are some of the things that we have seen over the years with couples that are obstacles and hindrances to them really becoming one. And it's that it's hard to give yourself away when you don't really know who you are. And I think that getting to know who you are is a lifelong journey.
And then the last one is the closed. This is where nobody knows, you don't know, nobody else knows. And these are the things that are going to be revealed to you, I think, because of circumstances and situations that happen in your life. You're going to find yourself reacting to things. Mm-hmm. And when those things come out and they become apparent, then it moves from that closed area, and it may move into a hidden area, and it may move into an open area. It just depends on
the person, but
it also depends on what it is that gets exposed, if I could say it that way.
Yeah. And I think your age, and Gil and I talk about all the time, turning 50 is something about when you turn 50. Wow, I love people. I don't care what they think. And I think that when you love people and you don't care what they think, it's a very powerful place, because either you love people or you care what they think. But when you can get to the place of loving them and not caring what they think, it gives you the freedom to be honest with yourself, with God, and for God to use you, because it's about the relationship. And I think a part of just the whole journey of growing and changing is being open. You have to be willing to be open with yourself and be honest with yourself, and not allow secrets to define you. Because some of the things that we've experienced and gone through, they're really not even our secrets. They're not even our story, but they've kind of become a part of our story.
Right. So when you have that story being told that affects you, those who are telling the story, who are the ones responsible for the story, remember that it's going to affect other people. We are not islands onto ourselves. That's something that I had to, and I'm still learning and growing into, because the things that we do and we go through is going to affect someone else in the long run.
I think about something as simple as when I think about, hidden areas of myself and things that I thank God for you. I thank God that you love me enough to see me the way that I am, but that you don't allow that to make you afraid of what is to come, because you look at me not for potential, but I think you look at me and you love me because you know me, the good and the bad about me. And to me, I think the real love is not just knowing the idea of the person. I think that healthy relationships require that you see every facet of the person and be able to say, you know what, this person is constantly trying to grow and change. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate that about you, that you're always open to and receptive about growth and changing, and realize that we don't have it all together.
It can be challenging, though. It can be challenging because I love being comfortable. I'm just going to put it that way. I love being in a position to where you know what's going on. Nothing is a surprise. Everything is good. I don't like my waves getting broke.
That's like a second in life.
Yeah, it is. But you know what? I like it. I like that consistency, but I also know that is also a place of stagnation.
Yes,
you know that when things are stagnant, you ever seen some stagnant water?
Yes.
Something that just sits still and never has
There's nothing going out, nothing coming in.
There's never an infusion of newness, whether it's new information, new people, new experiences, all the things that we kind of talk about
music.
all the things we talk about on these episodes. You have to challenge yourself, because if not, you will become stagnant. And when you know something gets stagnant, what starts happening? It starts
to smell.
Yes.
So I love how, and for you to check your blind spots, naturally there's tests you can take, but I just want to give us a self check to kind of check, am I resistant to being told about my blind spots? And one of the things about blind areas is that, how do you respond when someone tells you something that makes you feel uncomfortable? Something that maybe everyone keeps telling you the same thing and you keep dismissing it. Or you feel that your relationships you're stuck in your relationships. I hear a lot of women, especially over the years, I just keep ending up in the same kind of relationships. These are all signs that your blind spots are bigger than your strengths.
It may be one of those times of how many times has a friend or someone close to you told you that may not be good for you.
Right.
And you ignored it, or you dismissed it, or you proceeded on to do what you wanted to do. And unfortunately, the consequences were the same.
Yeah. And so we have to keep asking, we can't do the same thing and expect a different result. And one of the things I love about the workbook is that it's designed for you to do the work. It's designed for you to go through it and take the time to get to know yourself. Because even if you're married and you're happily married, there's still things about yourself that you may not even be aware of, and that areas of your life that you may have not even tapped into. And so the way to do that is to do something different. Because I think that so many times when it comes to relationships, we have all these things that we want and these goals that we have, and we hashtag goals, but without knowing any steps to take. And so one of the biggest steps is to be open to see what other people see. What do they see? How do they see you? Not from the perspective of you going to get your value from that. It's just information about your blind spots, because we all have them. And you don't want your blind spots to become the biggest spot in your life because you're not open to hearing or changing or growing.
So we're going to be seeing you guys on the next episode of the Rich Relationship Podcast with Gil and Renee. We hope we have added a little bit of value, maybe gave you something to think about when it comes to your hidden areas, your open areas, your closed areas, your blind spots, and having people around you that can actually feed into you so you don't be stagnant and you're not in a position where you have to be receptive to hear in order to grow.
Exactly.
We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for your investment in time. Remember to subscribe to the show and hit the notification icon to be notified when new episodes are posted on the podcast platform that you're listening from.
Or you can always find us on our website at richrelationshipsus.com or our YouTube channel, Rich Relationships with Gil and Renee. If you found this podcast helpful, or you think it could help someone that you know and care about, please pass it along and share it with them.
And also, you can always send your questions and comments to richrelationships.us@gmail.com. This is a weekly podcast, and the new episodes are going to be posted on Monday by 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Remember, we're stronger together.
Let's grow.